Well, I'm Gerald WWII, and the day I was 18, I volunteered for the Army, and I had already decided I wanted to fly an airplane. In fact, one of the things that my younger sister tells me, and she remembers, we were talking, this was just, I guess I was still 17 or something. We were walking and talking about what we were going to do when we grew up.
And you are how old now? Let's cover that before we go much further. How old are you now?
I'm 98.
98. That is amazing. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to your childhood, where you're growing up, to get to where we are now.
Well, we were talking, and I was talking what I wanted to do when I got older enough. And so I said, well, I want to fly an airplane. And that has been in my system for, I don't know for how long. But then I'm going to marry Mamie Tinker and see, and we're going to have a boy and a girl. Well, that all came true except the boy and the girl turned out to be a girl and a boy. But I always thought the boy should be older to look out for his younger sister. But she did a wonderful job of looking out of the younger brother. Well, of course, he wasn't there at that time, but he can remember how well they got along, and still do, but they're, well, this is kind of interesting. He's only 71, and Shirley is 73, isn't he? And, well, General Jim, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I'd known him for a while, and then I wondered how old he was. So I just recently I asked him how old he was. He says, well, I'm 71. I said, my son, that old? I thought generals had to be old folks.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
But as the day I was 18, I volunteered to go into, it was the Army then, Army Air Force, and went through training on it. But my ambition was to fly a P-51. That was a hot airplane at the time, right? And I went through single engine training with the Air Force. But when I went to Lincoln, Nebraska then for reassignment, got there, and they were having a shortage of people to be co-pilots on these big planes, and I had to have them. And they said if you weighed less than 40 pounds, you could go back to those.
140.
Right, 40 pounds.
140.
Well, 140, well, the 40, well. But it so happens that I weighed 142 when they weighed me. But they says, and that's, well, up there were people running all night and all this, going to lose enough pounds to get back to the pilot, the single engine. But I had that idea. But they said, well, you're on orders to fly out in the morning, so you won't have time to lose that. So is there something that's, you know, illness? Well, I'd had a little problem with tonsils. So I said, well, if I had some tonsils, well, you'll go in tonight and have your tonsils out. You can, but then when I did that, I couldn't even bid on after surgery that quick. So I stayed in Lincoln, Nebraska for 30 days then to get back healthy enough. And when I got healthy enough, I went in and he says, oh, it don't matter what age you are, you can be a co-pilot anyway.
You went through all that,
yeah.
and still wound up going to co-pilot.
But it was good for me, really. I have thought about it many times, or especially then, later. And my personality just really would not fit good with a fighter pilot, because they need to be just don't care, wild, and take chances. In fact, when I look back, some of the ones I were in training with, they had, you know, we had instructors, and some of them were instructors, and they'd go over and fly under the bridges on the river and all. And I never known a way that I would take chances like that. So I realized I was better off as a co-pilot on the B-17. So that's.
So when did you ship out for Europe as a co-pilot on a B-17?
Well, I went right back up there and was assigned to the crew there, and then we went down to Oklahoma and went through overseas. Well, all I had to get acquainted with the B-17, and it was our crew then, and we flew around the area there, and then we flew back up to Lincoln, Nebraska, and picked up a brand new B-17, just manufactured. And boy, we've got a new B-17. And we ferried it across to England. But on the way, of course, stopovers. But when we landed over there, they took our plane, put us on a train to go to where our assignment was at the airport.
So you didn't get to keep the new B-17?
No. Well, we got to fly it all the way across the ocean. But of course, they did some more changes on it. For combat. But and I was assigned. Now he can tell you more about the field I was on now than I could.
Where were you stationed?
At tell him. I Airport.
I England.
All right.
And he still stays in correspondence with people that are in on that. So, but after we landed there, and we took a few flights around England to get acquainted there and so forth, and then we came on. Went on one mission, the first one, and we had bombs that one to go and to bomb some German site, and we got almost to the target, and they said, well, that field is closed up, it's too much bad weather, take your alternate field. Well, we started for it, and they said, well, it's too much weather too, so just drop them somewhere. Don't bring the bombs home. So I have no idea where we dropped them. We found the spot and got rid of them. But went back, and then, I don't remember the time between to the second flight, but that is almost unbelievable that the night on the 20th of November was my pilot's 20th birthday. And well, I was older than him. Mine was 17th of September. I was 20, but this was November. But our squadron had an off day the next day. We were not scheduled to fly. So we was off to the club celebrating his birthday and no hurry to get to bed. About 4 o'clock the next morning, orderly came in shaking us awake and said, no, we're not. Lieutenant Lay, Lieutenant Delmerico, and so forth. He had our names on there. He was to get us up. So we argued a little bit, but said, well, maybe we better go check. Well, we went down and what we found out, that our squadron had the day off, but the 8th Air Force had a big full day to go in to, I think it was an oil refinery of some kind anyway. But they needed 7 planes out of our group to fly chaff ships. And I don't know how much you know about the chaff ships, But that was aluminum foil, looks like Christmas icicles, shredded up, and you got close to the target area, you dump that out to supposedly block all any aircraft fire, or
The radar.
radar got it. But we still don't know how good it works. But then, instead of having the day off, we were put in with 6 planes to fly along with the lead 8th Air Force, and they get right close to the target, pull out in front of them. So the anti-aircraft had pretty good shots at us. So we ended up with actually 3 of the engines out, and the 4th one had one of the governors off of it. So all we had was 1/2 an engine left, and to try and fly. Well, we were losing air pretty good, the altitude pretty fast, and so to get back just a little bit, as I said, it was our 2nd flight. Well, we were supposed to get a lot more instruction at the base we went to before we went on flight. We were supposed to get the parachute, to fit everyone that way, and then the backup in case of emergency.
Was the chest one.
Yeah, chest. Well, as it turned out, we hadn't gotten the backpack, but they just hadn't gotten around to it. So when it came time to bail out, we had the backpack and we hung it on the back of the seat because you weren't going to be flying with that thing on your chest. Lefty said to me, he says, well, we better, it's about 5,000 feet, and says, well, we better go ahead and bail out while we have enough altitude. He said, well, you'd get yours on and then take over, and then I'd get mine on. Well, I got out and went around and got it, snapped it on. And they also told us, well, it'd be a good idea to take your GI shoes with you, because in case you had to bail out, you had the fur-lined boots to wear, and if you're going to do much walking, you better like to have your GI shoes. Well, I reached down to get my shoes, big puff of silk in my face. So I wrapped my arms around it, and I didn't worry about shoes. But, and I don't know how familiar you are with the B-17, but you got the side door right at the cockpit, and it's only about so big. But I went over through there and dropped out, and as soon as I got clear of the plane, I opened my arms, and it worked. Wow. If it hadn't, I wouldn't be here today.
Nor would I.
Holy cow.
Wow.
So that must have been quite a moment when you're sitting there and you're descending past 5,000 feet, and you know that plane's going down, and then your parachute deploys in the aircraft. What was your first thought when that happened?
Well, well, and there was going to bail out. I mean, you don't think you have to do that, but you learn something in a hurry. When you don't have any choice, and also you wish you'd got a little more training with a parachute and knowing what to do.
I don't know how much training they would have had with one that was already deployed. But that was, when I read that in your book, I was like, oh my Lord, what a moment.
Well, and when I got out and started down, well, I started looking around. Of course, Germany, I had no idea where what. But I looked down, and here's a small river running, and it looked like I was going around and hit right in the middle of it. Well, I'd never even handled a parachute before, but what do you do? I've seen, the ones that paratroopers go and just guide it all around. But so I started pushing and pulling on stuff, and I decided I'd gotten off of the river and wasn't hitting it. And so then I started looking around. Well, there's a highway running right beside that. And the town there and the town up here. And so I said, well, nobody's seen me. And boy, I've got it made here. And then I looked in, and here came a motorcycle out of that town with a sidecar on it. And it came out, well, he hasn't seen me yet. But it came along, slowed down, and stopped and started walking under me and pushing. I decided he'd seen me.
Oh.
Well, then I was worried about it. It looked like I'd just landed in the sidecar. And I nearly did, I guess. But the last minute, well, the road there had been cut in the hill, and there's a steep bank just aside. And the last minute, the wind blew me up on the bank. And there's a pine thicket up there. And when I came down, the parachute hung in the top of and I stopped, my toes just touched the ground. Well, I came out of that quick and looked around. Well, if he was going to get me, he had to come up that steep bank pretty quick or go around and get up. And I went up through the woods. And I never saw him again. He never saw me. But I know, well, it's unbelievable that the way the circumstances were. Well, I was going on up through the woods running, and I heard voices off to my side. Well, I wondered, and I could see then through some of the trees, there's, I don't know, 4 or 5 men running up through. There's a thick, I guess there's a power line. I don't know, but anyway, there's an opening up through the woods. And they were running up through it and jabbering. And I figured they had seen me coming down and they were going to get me. Well, just so happened, right almost in front of me was where I guess the tree had blown down something for a little bit of a hump. So I just laid down behind that. So they went right on up the hill, just jabbering and going. So I waited up and went out and started down, find this place, and it was kind of a briar patch, and in it was a little sinkhole. So I went in the sinkhole and stayed till dark. And then I came out and started moving again.
Which direction were you headed?
Well, at the time, I was headed back, well, actually, as it turns out, even when I first hit the ground, I could hear long-range artillery. Boom, 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 boom. Well, I knew that then. I was getting close enough to the Rhine River. Now, this was in November, and the Battle of the Bulge officially started the 15th of December. So there's the German army on one side and our boys on the other side. And the artillery you could hear in the distance. Well, smarty that I was going to sneak through the German army and go across the river and get to the American army. Well, if I'd have gotten that far, I could have been shot how many times by either side. Because American uniform there, they figured it was one of them spying out on them. And if they'd gotten on the cross, if I come out of there, they, well. But see, I was smart.
You had a plan. You had a plan.
But I kept moving that direction. And but it was pretty, well, I came out of the woods, across and on down, and came to a small stream there. I figured it was maybe just 6, 8 inches deep or something, but about 8 feet wide. And I looked at that. Now this is in the nighttime now. And I said, well, that's too far. I can't jump it. No, especially with all this rag I had on. So I decided I pulled off the boots and pulled off the fur-lined pants and rolled up my pant legs and all, pulled them up, and started wading across and carrying the boots. Well, I didn't get but a few steps out, and the water was splashing up against me and getting my pants wet. Well, I tried to do that, and one of my boots dropped. Well, it hit on the water and was going down there. Well, I didn't have any choice but to get that boot, because barefooted on one foot in the frost, So I just dashed on across and threw all the stuff I had down on the bank, went back in, and started getting, I made about 2 or 3 tries at it and didn't get it. Well, I could hear it sound like, well, there's a little waterfall or rapids or something down there, and it wasn't far away. And if it got there, it would be gone. So I just dived in and got it. But then I came back out and went back up to where my clothes were and all. But here I'm soaking wet in this ice cold water.
In November in Europe.
Yeah, November 25th. I didn't know what to do, but I had, what clothes I had on was wet now, but what I had dumped off there was dry. So I went up just a little ways in the edge of the woods. And so I stripped down, took off all that wet stuff, and what I had dry I put back on. But then I had to start moving. Well, I had one boot that was dry, but the other one was soaking. And so I started up through the woods. Well, I had to go walking because, boy, we as good as an old country boy from East Tennessee that I was raised in the woods, around the woods. And so I knew, I didn't worry about that part of it. But I know I after a bit, well, I had to do something different. So I stopped and took off all that wet stuff. And what I had left dry, I put on. Of course, the boots, all I had, one was wet and the other. But then I had to walk, keep from freezing to death.
How far do you think you've come from your parachute landing to this point, to that river? Do you think it was a couple miles, or was it, how far do you think you'd made it?
No, well, not more than a mile, I'd say.
Okay.
It wasn't too far through the woods. And of course, I wasn't measuring miles or feet or anything else. But the next morning I came out and was looking out, and I found in that area, the German people all lived in little villages. They didn't live out on the farms like we do here or did. And as long as you stayed in the woods, you could just travel. And so I learned that pretty quick. So I didn't worry about it. But it came to the time when I needed to find some people. But the third day, I got, I was so cold and all, and the clothes finally dried out and warm. I made me wearing them, that I was semi good in them. But
that's about the third day your clothes are dried out.
Yeah.
Wow. It took your body heat that long to dry them.
Well, and going.
Yeah.
But I was still going toward the sound of those guns. Boom, boom, boom. Thank you, Lord, that I didn't find them. Well, you know, in the movies, these stars, well, whatever like that, they'd go through or whatever. Well, here it was. I was the star.
You star your own movie right now.
But finally, I'd been so cold, and there was been no food to eat all this time either. And I was getting pretty hungry. Well, late in the afternoon, I found one of the fields right outside of a little town. And there's some frozen turnips in the ground. And I'm an old country boy. I'd eaten turnips before. So I got me some frozen turnips, and there's some apple trees that still had some little small knotty apples frozen. But I made a meal out of that, and decided I had to get in out of the weather in this little town. So at night, about midnight, I guess, I slipped into the town and went down looking. Well, they had told us, you know, if you could find a church or a school, they, you know, some of them would help you. Well, I was going along looking. Well, I find a building a little taller than the other, looking up toward the sky. So I went around on the side of it, and the street going down the side of it. Well, I went down to the side of the building, and on the back, here's some steps going down to the basement. And well, I down the steps and tried the door, and it was open. I opened that door into the basement, but inside it was still about 3 foot square, and another door going into the basement. I tried it and it was locked. So, but here I was, out of the weather, and I kind of learned to roll up in the ball, but I spent the night there, and the rest of the night and the next day. So the next night then, I'd say, well, I'll get out and go again. You know, my clothes all got dried out by then. Well, I got up, went stuff, and started down the street. Well, it had snowed, and the snow was melting. And I slipped and fell twice before I could get out of the little town. I says, man, I can't do this. I'll just go back. I spent a good night in that basement. I went back down there and spent that night. Well, the next morning, about just after daylight, I heard some voices. And, uh-oh. Well, sure enough, I could hear their young voices. And it turned out there was two, and I'd say 10 to 12 years old, something like that. But then I realized I'd made some muddy tracks coming back and going down there. So they had seen the tracks and came down. Well, they pushed the door open. Well, I got up and stood, and the door opened in front of me, but it went back, and one of the boys, and you could tell they were having a little bit of an argument. One is saying, there's got to be somebody down there, and say, yeah, you know, what they're doing. He pushed the door back, and he looked around the edge of that door, and he let a scream you could hear a half mile. Boy, back out there, they probably took 2 or 3 steps on that. They were almost up those steps and out of there. Well, I knew in the town, the shape I was in, that no way I was going out. So I just waited. I mean, it wasn't but just a few minutes. Here came a bunch. Well, I think they were all men. I don't know, came running out and around. Well, I figured if they come around, and I have my 45 in a holster, but I'd get this off, because if they came around with a gun and saw me with one, they would probably just, I know what would happen. But took that off and laid it down in there where they could see it in the bottom there. And then I pointed to it and then held it up and showed them. So they motioned me to come on up, and I did. I gave them the gun then. But then they were so friendly and nice, and they went down the street, I don't know, just a block or two, and went into a town, a house there that I think it probably was the mayor's house or something, because he seemed to be that. And they were so friendly and nice to me, and she made me a cup of coffee and gave me some toast and I hadn't had to have in years. But then they had sent word into the town, so then they found one guy, man, to take me, and he took charge of me, went out, and we started, came out, and here alongside the road was a sign. And Westerberg is, I think it's 4.5 miles. But it ain't kilometers too, but it's 5 something. But anyway, and here, me and the sore feet still got to walk that, and I had no choice. Well, we started out and got about halfway, I guess, and met a young soldier boy, and he had his gun and his uniform and all, but he took charge of me then. Well, up till then, I tried to talk, you know, 'cause I don't speak German, don't understand it. Those people didn't think much of English either. But this young guy, he was determined. He was going to talk to me. Well, we tried a little bit. He gave up because he'd do it. So he just took me on into the little town and went in down the side street, little place. And there's a sidewalk running down and some steps up in the building there. So he took me in up the steps, and then right on the right-hand side was an office. He took me in there. Well, there's nobody in the office, but his office is an Army guy. But boy, when I went in and sat down, the first thing I did was pull those boots off. My feet were so sore and all. And trying to get, but then the guy, he had to be the owner of the office, German officer, came in. He took one look, and man, he went in orbit. He was mad. Here was a crazy American in his office with his shoes off. Well, he chewed me out good, but I didn't understand that either. I just sat there kind of grinned at him, but the little boy that brought me in was behind him, and he was about to split laughing, but he didn't dare let it be known because he knew I wasn't understanding a word of it. But then he kicked at the shoes, and I got the idea he wanted me to get their shoes back, or the boots back on. But then had a little boy take me back out on the street and on the sidewalk next to the building. And I started to sit down. You know, I had to stay standing to stand up. But then there I stood as a specimen for everybody to see or whatever. But first, some young kids came up, and they spoke just a few English words, and we couldn't do much talking. So they went back, and I found the older brother, one of them. He came back, and he spoke perfect English. And so we had a little conversation. Well, in the meantime, a young lady, she was middle-aged, I guess, came up, and she spoke perfect English. And she talked to me and asked me, you know, and I told her a little bit of what happened, how sore I was and so forth, sick. And why was I standing up? I said, well, he wouldn't let me sit down. She went right up the steps in, and I could hear her. And she chewed him up one side and down the other. Of course, again, I didn't understand the German, but I got to get. So he sent Mark back down. Go ahead and sit down. Oh
my goodness. So that's probably what, 7 days in now? 6 days, 7 days from when you've been shot down?
I get, well, for the first day, you know, when I was shot down.
Or was it 3 or 4? Pretty close.
Yeah, I don't remember now.
No, that's fine.
That's been a long time ago.
It's been a long time ago. It has.
But they.
I need to ask you a question. Did you see any of your other crew bail out?
No, because I guess I was one of the first ones out because I was, you know, just going to take over the plane again. But then
when you had that chute malfunction. You went to the front of the line.
I went. I didn't see them down or any time till. Well, I'll tell you in just a few minutes.
Okay, go right ahead. Let's segue from there. I was just curious if they had come down with you and got captured as well at the same time.
Well, I don't know. They may have, but not. But see, my time of walking on through the woods, they probably. Well, I think. Well, the tail gunner landed in the lake and drowned. They tried to get him, but he drowned before they could get him. Well, of course, that parachuting all over him, he didn't have much chance. But the rest of them were all picked up when they hit the ground.
Okay.
And so they didn't have any story.
So let's go back to the lady chewing out the officer and you getting to sit down.
Well, that along in the afternoon, then they gave me an escort, again, military, put me on the train, and I started for Frankfurt, but I guess maybe halfway or something we got and just stopped it, and I got off, and there was a bunch of French men in there, and I don't know if they were prisoners or conscripted for laborers, but they were in there and free to go around and do it, and so they fed me best they could and real nice to me, and then they put me in a cell. It was down at the inn in there. Well, and for me to take with me, they wrapped up a sandwich and wrapped it in paper. Well, but when I guess I passed out when I got on the, well, it was kind of a shelf there for a bed. And in a little while I heard some rattling noise. I wondered what, and look, well, some rats had come in and trying to get into my sandwich. So I shooed them off. And the next morning they put me on a train, took me on into Frankfurt. And that was kind of a collection spot they did. And well, they had a little interrogation there, but it didn't take him long to decide I didn't know anything. Well, what could I tell him? It was interest. But then they put, well, it was there, you know, for that. And then they put us on the train to start heading back out. And got on the train going, and there I met the pilot, the navigator, and the bombardier. No, it was Fitz, the pilot, navigator, and well, he was the one that
Waist gunner?
No, he was the one that kept up with where we were.
Navigator, yeah.
Navigator. I couldn't think of navigator. But so the back with friends, and also, well, we went to this town. I don't know where it was. We were just going north, and they took us out over, and I guess we spent 2 or 3 nights there at that place, and there's American Run there, and we got fed and taken care of in there, and then back on the train to go. But in there before we met Joe crew. Well, it's almost unbelievable. The crew that was closest to us all through training was there. They had been shot down too, and they were in there. But they were real friends, you know. We were real buddies, and so we had that then to go with.
Now you all wound up going to the same location. They didn't split you up, correct?
Yeah, right.
Wow. So you wound up at your prisoner of war camp in force with a half a dozen or more friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But well, and we got on the way going on up there, and we were coming into Berlin, And that's December the 7th. And well, it was the 6th and 7th the next day. And we got concerned because that was Pearl Harbor Day and the 7th. And we figured if we knew our boys back at home, they would be up for a big deal over Berlin. And here we're sitting in the parking lot with a train. But the weather socked in pretty bad, and they didn't bomb, but we sweat that one out. Then on the way, we came through a little town or something, and the RAF was bombing the town. So we were on the train, and bombs going off on that side, and I'm sitting over the window on the other side, and they were all looking out there, and I looked over on this side, and I saw them going off over there too. But the train, it kept moving. Just you could, well, the guards that supposed to be with us were out and ducking under other cars and stuff in case the bomb went off. But we got out of that and went on from Berlin, but we really sweated out that next day and going through Berlin. But we went on up on the North Sea to Stalag Luft I. I learned a bunch of German. Nichts sprechen Sie Deutsch.
How long were you there?
5 months.
Okay. So what did you just say in German right there?
Nichts sprechen Sie Deutsch. I don't speak German.
Ah. And neither do I, obviously.
Well, you learn some words when people are jabbering at you all the time.
Did they do any interrogations in that camp, or was this
No.
just basically a holding
No,
location?
Either I found out we were dumb, didn't know anything.
So,
But it was real fortunate in that respect. This turns out to be an Air Force officers camp. And the rumor was, and we couldn't prove it, but we liked the sound of it, that if it came a time to swap prisoners, that we would be worth more to the Germans to trade than it would be the ground pounders. So we're all Air Force officers in that camp, about 9,000 of us.
wow.
But
Now, I believe when I was reading some of your information, some of the prisoners that were in there were also prisoners from, was it, not Dieppe, it was Dunkirk.
oh,
So-
well, there was Air Force officers, and we were in North Compound 3, and there were well, actually 3 before us, one south and then 1 and 2, and we were in the last ones up there. Well, you see, this was just coming up to the end of the war. Mm-hmm. In fact, that big battle that I missed,
Battle of the Bulge.
that was November the 30th, and the Battle of the Bulge officially started 15th of December. So that was how close to the end of the war it was.
Yep. But it was still some horrific times.
Oh,
Everybody was thrown at it right to the very end.
oh yeah, yeah.
Now, while you were in the camp, who liberated you?
Well, the Russians,
The Russians did.
Mm-hmm. they were coming, and well, we heard, and I think it made sense. Well, the Russians were coming from that side, and they said our American army is coming up on Berlin, but they stopped and let the Russians take Berlin, they said, because they figured the Russians would be meaner on them than we would have been.
They were.
Well, that's,
Yes, they were. They were looking for a little payback.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did you, in the camp itself, can you tell me what a day was like in the camp? What did you do in the camp?
Well, there wasn't much you could do.
So there was none of the gardening you see in the movies?
Oh no,
None of
no,
that?
no,
There was-
no, no. We
You just worked in the
in the camp and could get around some inside, but
any work details where they sent you out? Or did
well,
you-
they did,
As officers, not so much, yeah.
No.
Yeah, I can see where that-
and it was all Air Force officers. So we
when
just
the Russians liberated you, how did they get you back to the U.S.?
well, this was kind of interesting in a way too. When the Russians came in and up to the compound and all, well, we were happy to see them, and they were happy to see us, you know. And they had a lot of American trucks and stuff. And he patted, say, Amerikanski, Amerikanski. They were, you know, real friendly to us and would look out for us. But we just stayed there. Well, they got combat, and when it got cleared enough, then England flew in B-17s and picked us up at the airport there.
How many guys would they put on a B-17 at a time if you had?
Well, they had a lot
9,000?
of B-17s handy.
So they were using them for ferrying. I got it. Wow, that's pretty amazing. How did you stay in the Air Force or in the Army Air Corps? And what was your career after World War II?
Well, when I got home, of course, I had a long stretch of freedom, and because I hadn't, see, I don't know how long, well, but on till after Christmas, and then a permanent leave, I guess is what they called it. I went, so I just went to Oak Ridge and applied for a job, and they hired me on the spot pretty much, but it goes back to that when I got back and the Mamie Tinker I told you that I was going to marry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she and my daughter were the same age and real close friends, and her younger brother and I were real close friends. In fact, it turned up they've married too, but we were together there then, and well, he was in the Army and came back. I don't remember just when he came back, but with Mamie then, well, she had a thriving boyfriend there too. Well, I'd been gone, but I didn't let that stop me.
You had a whole new set of goals.
Yeah, well, I'd already told my sister way back that I was going to marry Mamie Tinker, and but then, well, we dated quite a bit there then. Well, I was free to do whatever I wanted to be. I was on leave, and so finally I proposed, and she accepted. And then we hadn't even talked about wedding plans as such and all, you know, we were just together. But when I got out and I went up to Oak Ridge and got the job, and I wanted to get a house and then we'd get married. Well, I couldn't even get on the list of a house unless I was married. So I said, well, we're going to have to do something about this. Mm-hmm. So we went back down. Mamie's brother had the car and was driving us in. I come back by, my uncle lived over in the valley from Chattanooga over there, well, around Sequatchie. But I had an uncle there, and just a few weeks before, I guess, he was saying that he had ordered him a new pickup truck during the war, and he hadn't gotten it finally, but it had come in. So he had this 40 Chevrolet car that he'd sell it to one of the grandsons, the boys that would like to have it. And I said, I'll take it. So as we were going back down by there, we went over there and I got the car. So then I had my own transportation. We went on down to her house, and then the next weekend we went to Chattanooga and let her buy her wedding outfit. And so then we were married.
Did you get married in Chattanooga?
No.
Back here?
Back down there, no. See,
Okay.
I had moved to Alabama, on Sand Mountain, Alabama. I don't know if you've heard of it or not.
I have not.
But it's right up in the northeastern corner of Alabama. Tennessee line's up there, and the Georgia other line there.
That's
And
right
we're
there in that
just
corner of all three.
right. Yeah.
Yep. So what were you doing at Oak Ridge? May I ask what your job was at Oak Ridge?
Well,
Because that was still the secret city after World War II.
Yeah.
Not many people, unless you've read about it, it just popped up overnight, and they imported all kinds of people here.
Yeah.
When you were talking about housing, I wasn't surprised it was going to be a challenge because housing was hard to come by back then.
Well, what they called housing at that time was another question.
Yeah, it was row houses. It was,
No.
There was 3 different style homes they built. There was for the top end people, the middle, and low.
Low.
Yeah, low. Kind of shack.
Very low. But
How did that compare to that little room that you were in under that church? Was that room, that little alcove, nicer than the house you lived in when you got married?
well, no, that was a whole different story. But I went back. We went at Chattanooga and bought the outfits and all. So on the Monday, we went to Fort Payne, Alabama, and I went to and bought the marriage license and got all there. Went over to the church, and the minister of the church there was friends I'd known anyway and all. And so we got married in his living room with her, his wife, as one.
As one of the witnesses.
Yeah. So then we got back in my new car and went to Chattanooga and let her buy some more clothes and all.
That's pretty amazing. So, did you stay in the military? Because I think I read that you were retired as a major, didn't you?
Yeah.
So, what did you do after the war?
Well, when the Air Force pulled out of the Army, well, I was transferred over to the Army Air Force, U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
And so I stayed in the reserves all the way through. And
what else did you fly? Did you continue flying B-17s, or did you transition in?
no, I don't think I ever got it back into the B-17.
Okay.
But they had, training planes and all again. And but that wasn't a worry. I stayed, and I took correspondence courses and so forth with them. In fact, well, to back up just a little bit, I just before I went in, in Chattanooga Times, they had an ad in there, Civil Service did, needing workers. And I went in to Chattanooga, and they had a test and all you took. I took the test, and they hired me and sent me down to Alabama School of Trades at Gadsden, Alabama for training. And the opening they had there was in the sheet metal shop training. But so I took a course in sheet metal training. Well, in that time, I became 18, and I went to Anniston and I volunteered at the service and back. But then they didn't call me to active duty till 1st of February, I think. So what I did then, that's when I went up there. But part of the sheet metal guy the instructor there was real friendly and nice. And he had bought a spot of land out there and was going to develop a subdivision. And he had a course of drafting in there that I was taking in. So he had me to draw up the plan for his subdivision there. So I did that. Well, then when I went to Oak Ridge and applied for a job, well, at that time the war was over. And people were quitting out there and leaving in bunches because they were there to dodge the draft and the war was over. So I applied, for a job at K-25. And they said, well, we're right now, don't know, but we have such a load here with the crew there that's checking men out now, and they record all the records and stuff. If you go in there and help out for a little bit to get, well, and the employment was in one end of the building and that was in the same end of the building. So I went over there and just, I don't know, only a couple of months I guess I did there, but I picked up their shuffling papers around pretty good. And the guy called me and then up there, he said, well, now, I need you and I'd like to have you, but you don't have a future in this. You need to get a better job. So I'm going to send you up to the engineering group and let you interview with them. So I went up there and the fella was J. Fred Honeycutt. But he was in charge of the architectural area there. And I told him, what little drafting I had and that. And he says, well, you don't have much experience, but if you're flying B-17s, you can learn. So he hired me, and I ended up as a civil engineer when I left there years later.
That is fantastic.
But I took correspondence courses at international correspondence schools in civil engineering and graduated from that.
I don't think the kids today, or there's not many people that remember what correspondence courses were. That was the internet before the internet. That's where you got your education. And it was, curriculum, self-taught, and you had to wait quite a while when you sent your tests in, did you not, to find out?
Well, I was back and forth. I don't know. It took probably a year for me to go through the course and all, but then, well, again, he was the type that took care of you.
Yeah.
You don't. He's not chewing you out and so forth and so on. But well, and the Air Force. Also in the reserves, that took some courses with him. And and I took some from UT that corresponded to this. Mm-hmm. And surprisingly enough, I should have been at least the first lieutenant when I was shot down. We never did get the paperwork. But pretty quick I got moved up to captain then in there. And when I retired, when I was 70, they retired me out of the reserves. Still in reserve, but active reserve. And so when I got my papers there, I've been promoted again. I guess the goodbye promotion, I guess.
So you went from second lieutenant, should have been a first lieutenant, wound up as a captain, retired as a major at 70, and you're now 98.
No, at 60.
Oh, at 60, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And you're now 98. What's your plan for the next 20 years?
Well, It's be hard to say.
One day at a time, isn't it?
One day at a time, for sure.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about from any part of your career or any part of your life?
Yeah. Well, again, I talk about, Oak Ridge when we say I got married.
Yep.
Well, then I was eligible for a house.
Starter home.
They had those fabricated ones. It was a two family unit, I guess. But it had one room and a bathroom and a kitchen area. But there, it was.
What did that house cost when you bought that?
Well, I didn't buy it there.
Oh, they only leased it to you?
No, well, they furnished it at that time. See,
as part of being hired.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Well, but
It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad.
but the so-called house, it was prefabbed in somewhere and hauled in on a truck, and there's a two-family unit, and sat down, and what you had in the first room there was a kitchen range that had burned coal in it, and that was your cooking range, and the water heater went a coil in there, the water heater, and that was their heat for the house. There's no other heat. The windows in there, had a groove in the bottom of the sash.
Yeah.
And it sat on a little plier. Pick it up and you drop it down. And that's the way you open the windows if you needed to. Sometimes the wind would help you. It would open them automatically.
So I've got to ask, this starter home, how did that compare to the barracks they had you living in the camp? Were your conditions better in the camp than?
Well, kind of like that. But, it was living.
Yes.
And then we finally got a one-bedroom flat top, one of the prefabricated, and it had stoves and heaters and refrigerators and all that good stuff. It was real nice and good for us. And as a child came along, we got a two-bedroom. The first was one-bedroom flat top, and this is a two-bedroom flat top. Well, then when my son came along, I wanted to get a three-bedroom. Well, the older one had to be 5 years old before I'd be eligible. That's when I was eligible to go to Kingston.
Go where?
Kingston.
Kingston, okay.
I came down and I bought a lot, and it was just developing here at that time. Mm-hmm. And it's the woman. I don't know. Lady would be a kind of stretch in the imagination. She was a crook from word go. But she was developing that one lane there, and in lots, and having built two-bedroom houses. And so I came down and bought one of the lots from her. And I was going to buy lot number 2, but I was going to what I ended up doing is drawing me a set of house plans, 3-bedroom. But she had somebody that would buy that number 2 lot, so I took number 3, which was better off for me. And I designed the house, drew up the plans, and then her contractor, she had contractor building the houses. They built a house for me. And
That's where the home started. Your home.
And well, he can tell you that's where he was born. Was a year old when we moved into it. So that's where he grew up.
Tell them about the troop ship on the way home from England.
Your troop ship
True.
back from England? How you got back from England to the U.S.?
Well, help me a little bit.
It was overloaded, and it had two main engines or two propellers, and one went out. So it took them twice as long to get home as it did the others that were with them.
Oh my goodness.
I've forgotten that one. Good.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I think, Gerald, when we were talking, did you fly B-25s at any point?
No.
You didn't fly?
No.
Okay, but I remember
I rode into one.
okay, yeah, you flew in that one, but I thought I remember somebody asking you what your favorite plane.
Oh, B-17 by far.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, they were so nice to me. They put us up front, up there, right behind the pilot and the co-pilot in that. And there's the engines. You could almost reach out and touch them. Rattle, bang, boom.
No.
Well, I thought you had said the B-17 was your favorite.
Well, it
Yeah.
was good.
Had you gotten to the point where you named your plane yet? Or was it so new you didn't even put a name on your aircraft yet?
I guess we did. Well, you see that we got to the one in England, and it was our second mission. We didn't have.
Didn't have time to put a name on her.
The one that he flew that got shot down was called the Penzi Bell.
Okay.
But now, he can tell you a lot more about where I was in England than I remember now. He's in with correspondence with people over there that on the field there. And
Gotcha. And is there anything else you'd like to say here while we're recording?
well,
I think we've covered just about everything from start out through the service. And did you keep in touch with any of the other crew when you got back?
well, some of them, but not much.
Yeah. Did you ever go to any of the reunions and meet up with anybody later on?
Well, now this is another interesting point that I think I told you, but we got on the train after, and this other crew that we knew were there, and we were in the POW with them there while we were there, and then we came back here, and in and that was in 45, the guy, and I think it was him that says, "As a room, there were 24 of us in the room there, in prison, and we haven't had anything. Why don't we have a reunion of this bunch and get together?" Well, I think most of them agreed to it. So in 1988, we had our reunion. Well, in getting ready for that and all, he got sent word around, why don't each one of us write up the story of how we got to the prison camp and send it to me, and I'll compile them and then have a book. Well, as it turned out, I'm the only one that did. But that's
where that book got.
That's where mine came from.
Yep.
I do have another question.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Was it your great-grandson that went back to the spot where
Yeah.
you landed?
Yeah.
That is super interesting. It's you've got a picture of it there too.
Yeah, my great grandson graduated from high school.
Want me to get to that page?
Oh, this one I didn't want to be. Let me keep. This is to go already fixed up for just any one of them will do.
Well, this one's got my pictures
Yeah.
in it.
In the back of that, if you'll see a little
Yeah.
writing letter. There.
Oh,
My grandson, his great-grandson was an exchange student. And a German boy, Johann, or Jonas, I've forgotten his last name, came to Murfreesboro, where my son lives, and stayed with them for a year. And then Caleb, our grandson, and his great-grandson, went to Jonas's house. And Jonas's father was very appreciative of the World War II veterans that freed them, and wrote a very nice letter to my dad. And then Caleb stayed with them for 6 months to finish out his junior year in high school, and his father hired a historian and found this spot.
Holy
Now-
cow.
Interestingly enough, here's my description
Yep.
of it. And people were thinking I looked at that and wrote this.
Yep.
But that
That came along much later on.
was found.
Wow. What a great photo.
But see the
Yep.
river,
There's your river.
and it.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
yeah.
And behind you there, that is actually your jacket.
That's the jacket.
That is the jacket you wore the whole way.
The whole time.
Wow.
This one that's got the.
Yeah.
That's the one we want to get to them.
Oh, the letter in the back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's from
Yeah.
TSD.
Yep.
And one other thing, I think you hit on this just a little bit, but you're still in the reserve, just not active duty. Now, did Jim say that you were the oldest reservist he
Well,
knew of, had met, or what was
So you're
that?
still in the reserves?
yeah. Well, inactive.
Okay.
But
But I don't think anybody could really use the word inactive to describe you at all, Gerald. I would say that is a misnomer. You're probably,
he can tell you the story. They had the anniversary of the U.S. Air Force just recently in Knoxville.
yeah.
And we went, and I ended up being the oldest. And they called me up on the platform with 4 or 5 generals on the platform. And he has a story. We were sitting down front there at front,
Yep.
and the lady was with him. And they called me to come up, and I started to get up and go. And you can tell that part of the story.
She said, "Do you need to help your father up to the stage?" And about that time, he was taking the steps 2 at a time. And she looked around and said, "Oh, I guess not."
That is fantastic. Yeah, I think inactive does not fit you at all. No. Well, sir, I really appreciate your time. Do you guys have any questions?